So I want you to picture this. It is Friday afternoon. The clock is, it's inching toward 4 p.m.
Oh, I know that feeling so well.
Right. You are just wrapping up your tasks, feeling that familiar, heavy end of the week exhaustion just kind of settling into your bones.
Yet you're completely drained.
Exactly. So you are packing up your bag, mentally preparing to switch off for the next 48 hours, and then you hear it.
Yep. The universal Friday ping.
The inevitable question, the one that happens literally everywhere, like at the office, in a text message, in a group chat, in the hallway. What are you doing this weekend?
It seems like such an innocent question, too.
It does. But did you know that when you hear that question, your brain essentially perceives the next, 3 seconds as a high-stakes negotiation?
Oh, absolutely. It triggers a whole cascaded decision-making.
Yeah, because it seems like a casual throwaway line. But if you really stop to think about it, that tiny little inquiry carries a massive amount of social weight.
It really does.
So welcome to this custom-tailored deep dive created just for you. Today, we are taking a microscope to the subtle, everyday social choreography of weekend socializing.
Great topic.
And our source material today is actually really interesting precisely because of how unassuming it is. We are looking at a dialogue excerpt from a Speak English podcast lesson featuring two speakers, Sarah and James.
Right, which on the surface just looks like a standard language lesson.
Yeah, exactly. At first glance, you might look at this and think, well, it's just a language lesson for non-native speakers, right?
Yeah.
Just basic vocabulary.
But it's really not just that. I mean, it presents itself as a straightforward guide to everyday conversational phrases. But when you look at the actual pragmatic function of the words they choose,
The actual real-world application.
exactly, the how and the why they use specific phrases, you realize it was something else entirely.
Okay, let's unpack this, because if you look closely at what Sarah and James are actually doing in this seemingly basic dialogue, we aren't just looking at vocabulary.
No, not at all.
We are looking at the invisible matrix of unspoken rules that fluent speakers use, like every single day, to navigate their relationships.
It really is a masterclass in social navigation because human interaction, especially around our free time, is incredibly fragile.
Oh, totally.
And this source, whether it intends to or not, lays out a literal blueprint for maintaining social harmony. It shows us how we balance our time, how we leverage our availability, and most importantly, how we communicate our personal boundaries.
Which is so hard to do without accidentally signaling to our friends that we just don't care about them.
Exactly. It's a remarkably thin tightrope to walk.
It really is. So let's start with that inevitable question we mentioned. In the source dialogue, Sarah kicks things off simply by asking James, "What are you doing this weekend?"
A classic opening.
Right. Or, as the source notes, you might hear variations like, do you have any plans for the weekend? It's such a standard opening, but it's actually this highly strategic data gathering mission.
It's reconnaissance. That's what it is.
Reconnaissance, yes. Like a high-stakes poker game where no one wants to show their cards first.
Exactly. It's the social equivalent of sending out a sonar ping before you steer your submarine into unknown waters.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Yeah, when Sarah asks, "What are you doing this weekend?" she isn't actually asking for an itemized itinerary of his Saturday.
Right. She doesn't care if he's, doing laundry at 2 p.m.
Exactly. She is testing the waters of his availability and his mental bandwidth before she takes the risk of extending an invitation.
And we all know why that reconnaissance is necessary. Because getting asked, "Are you free this weekend?" before you know what the person wants you to do is essentially a social trap.
This is terrifying.
It really is. You sit there thinking, okay, if I say yes, am I agreeing to a fun dinner? Or, am I getting drafted into helping you move a couch up 3 flights of stairs?
Precisely. You don't want to overcommit, but you also don't want to shut the door completely on a good time.
Right.
And on the flip side, the person asking doesn't want to just walk up and say, "I demand you accompany me on a hike at 8 a.m. That's a massive imposition.
And it's way too aggressive. So once Sarah does her reconnaissance and finds out James is essentially free, because he mentions he might just stay in and relax, he's exhausted from the work week, she makes her move.
She goes for it.
She does. She invites him on a Saturday morning hike. But the specific language the source highlights for this invitation is really telling. She doesn't say, "Come hiking with me."
No, she doesn't.
She says, "Why don't you join us?" And the lesson also offers alternative phrases like, "You should come," or "Feel free to join."
Notice the linguistic structure of those invitations. Because in sociolinguistics, there is a concept called face-threatening acts.
Oh, face-threatening acts.
Yeah. Basically, we all have this innate desire to be autonomous, to not be imposed upon by others.
Right. Nobody likes being bossed around.
Exactly. So an invitation, no matter how fun the event is technically a demand on someone's time. It's a slight imposition.
Oh, I see.
So these phrases are intentionally designed to mitigate that threat. They're soft.
Oh, wait, let me push back on that for a second. Let's take the phrase, feel free to join. If someone says that to me, my immediate reaction is that it actually sounds a bit, I don't know, too casual.
Too casual? How so?
Like almost apathetic. Does using language that loose risk making the listener feel like their presence doesn't really matter? Like, hey, we are doing this whether you're there or not, whatever.
That is a completely fair interpretation.
Mhm.
And it really highlights the risk-reward ratio of social language. But what's fascinating here is the underlying psychology of the soft invite.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Well, when Sarah says, "Why don't you join us?"
Mm.
or uses the phrase like, "feel free," the primary goal isn't actually to sound overwhelmingly eager.
Really? I would think you'd want to sound eager to make them feel wanted.
You'd think so. But overwhelming eagerness creates a sense of obligation. And obligation creates pressure.
And nobody wants weekend pressure.
Exactly. These phrases are designed specifically to lower the social pressure on the invitee by providing a comfortable, guilt-free exit ramp.
Oh, so you are giving them an out before they even have to ask for one.
Precisely. If they want to decline, they can do so without feeling like they're crushing your deeply held hopes and dreams.
Right, right.
And paradoxically, by providing that low-pressure environment and that easy exit, you actually make a yes much more likely. You aren't cornering them in a social trap. You are merely placing an opportunity on the table and stepping back.
You are leaving the door open, but you are deliberately not shoving them through it.
Exactly.
That makes perfect sense. It's a way of protecting both your own ego from a harsh rejection and their autonomy. So let's say that soft invite is just floating in the air. The door is open.
Now they have to respond.
Right. How do we walk through that door effectively? We pivot from the invitation to the art of the acceptance. In the source material, James doesn't just reply with the sterile, "Yes, I will attend."
Thank goodness, because that would sound so strange.
It would. He uses this phrase, "count me in." The source points out that this is a highly natural way to accept, or they also suggest simply saying, "I'm in."
It's short, it's punchy, and it's incredibly dynamic.
It totally changes the energy of the interaction. If you say, "Yes, I will attend," you sound like a lawyer signing a contract.
Yeah, very formal.
But "count me in" sounds like you are actively jumping onto a moving train. It implies momentum.
And socially, it does something crucial for group cohesion.
What do you mean?
Well, when someone takes the risk of extending an invitation, even a soft one, they are putting themselves out there. By responding with an enthusiastic "count me in," you are immediately validating their risk.
Oh, you're rewarding them for asking.
Exactly. You are rewarding them. In that split second, the dynamic shifts. You are no longer two isolated individuals negotiating a schedule across a divide. You've instantly become a collective group with a shared goal.
And what's really interesting about this specific shared goal, this Saturday morning hike, is that earlier in the dialogue, James was heavily leaning toward just doing nothing.
Right, he was very tired.
Yeah, he explicitly tells Sarah he had a brutal week and was planning to just stay in and relax. And I think this is a classic weekend dilemma that everyone listening right now can totally relate to.
Absolutely.
It's that intense friction between the sheer exhaustion of the modern work week and the genuine human desire for social connection.
It is the eternal struggle of the modern adult weekend. You want to see your friends, but your couch is just so comfortable.
Right. Couch always wins. So, James is tired. His default setting is to decline. How does Sarah manage to flip his stance and get him to enthusiastically say, "count me in"?
It's not just the soft invite.
No, it's how she frames the logistics.
Yes. This is where Sarah's approach is incredibly highly evolved.
Yeah.
She doesn't just offer an abstract idea of hanging out.
Which can be so daunting when you're tired.
Extremely daunting. Instead, she provides clear, firm logistical boundaries that make the physical exertion feel manageable to a brain that is already fatigued.
Yes, she builds a sandbox for the commitment. She tells him exactly where they are meeting. The source introduces the word trailhead here, and exactly what time, 8 a.m.
But the real kicker is when she specifies the duration.
Yes. She mentions that it's usually about a 3-hour round trip.
That 3-hour round trip detail is the deciding factor. When someone is tired, the most terrifying thing you can do is invite them to an open-ended event.
Oh, I hate open-ended events.
Right, because an open-ended event feels like it might consume their entire weekend. By defining the exact parameters of the commitment, Sarah is subtextually telling him, I'm only asking for a finite portion of your Saturday morning.
By 11 a.m., you are free.
Exactly.
She's basically negotiating with his exhaustion, and then she pairs that physical exertion with the promise of rest. She points out that they can get an early start and then have a slow day afterward.
And it works perfectly.
It does. James even repeats it back to her, saying, that sounds like a nice balance. It's brilliant because she crafted a plan that honored his fundamental need to rest while still offering a low-stakes way to connect.
She made the invitation irresistible by removing the fear of an endless social obligation.
It highlights a really profound rule of adult friendships, I think. If you want people to say yes, give them an itinerary with a clear ending time.
It is the golden rule of adult socializing.
I am absolutely going to start using that. Like, come to my house for dinner. I promise to kick you out by 9:30. People would love that.
They really would. It's so reassuring.
But okay, we've talked about the nuance of the low-pressure invite, and we've talked about how to enthusiastically lock in a plan. But let's be real with each other. The true test of social grace isn't saying yes.
Saying yes is the easy part.
Right, especially when the plan is well crafted. The real challenge, the place where friendships are either maintained or fractured, is how we handle rejections.
Without a doubt. Declining an invitation is one of the most fraught maneuvers in daily communication.
We have all been there. You get a text inviting you to something you cannot or do not want to attend, and you just stare at your phone for 20 minutes sweating.
Just typing and deleting over and over.
Exactly. Trying to craft a response that says, I am not coming, without accidentally saying, I hate you and I hate your event.
It is a delicate balance.
So let's pivot to the most complex part of this source material. In the lesson, Sarah and James do a role-play scenario. Sarah pretends to invite James to a Saturday evening birthday party. But James has a conflict. He is going to visit his parents.
Right.
And the lesson lays out specific phrases to handle this elegantly.
And notice the anatomy of the response they use here. It is a very specific three-step formula.
Right. James says, thanks for the invite, but I already have plans. Or they give the alternative, I'd love to, but I can't make it this time. And then they introduce what has to be one of the most vital idioms in the English language.
Oh, yes.
James asks, can I take a rain check?
The rain check. It is the ultimate social diffuser.
The source notes it as a polite way to postpone a plan, or just saying, maybe next time. And the golden rule they hammer home here is that softening your language is absolutely key. Nobody should ever just deliver a hard, blunt no.
Never just a single no.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Why? Why are we all so socially terrified of just being direct?
It's a great question.
Like, if I ask you to a party and you have to visit your parents, why can't you just say, no, I am visiting my parents? Why do we feel this immense biological pressure to pad our rejections with apologies, compliments, and rain checks?
It's a fascinating question. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it really comes down to evolutionary biology and human vulnerability.
Evolutionary biology.
Yes, absolutely. We have to remember that human beings are deeply, fundamentally wired for tribal connection. For our ancestors, being separated from the group wasn't just sad, it was a literal death sentence.
Oh, wow. Because you couldn't survive alone.
Exactly. And modern neuroscience actually backs this up. Functional MRI scans show that when a person experiences social rejection, the brain activates the exact same neural pathways that register physical pain.
Wait, really? Social rejection physically hurts the brain?
Yes, the brain processes a social slight in the same region that processes a stubbed toe or a physical burn.
That is wild.
So when someone extends an invitation to you, they are taking a social risk. They are expressing a desire for your inclusion in their tribe. Therefore, a blunt, hard no, even if you just mean, logically, my schedule is full on Saturday, is very easily perceived by their threat detection system as a rejection of their person, not just a rejection of their event.
Wow. So when I agonizingly rewrite a text message to say, I'd so love to come, but I'm not just being polite, I'm literally trying not to trigger their brain's pain receptor.
Exactly. You are performing social anesthesia.
Social anesthesia, that's so good.
That padding is designed to protect the structural integrity of the relationship. These linguistic softeners, starting with a buffer like thanks for the invite, pivoting with I'd love to, but, and ending with an alternative like a rain check, they act as a kind of social escrow account.
A social escrow account. I like that analogy. Break that down for me.
Well, when you decline an invite, you are technically causing a momentary deficit in the relationship's value. Right. You're withdrawing your presence.
Right.
But by asking for a rain check, you are taking the relational value of that missed event and depositing it safely into the future.
Oh, I see.
You are sending a very specific subtextual message. You are signaling, our relationship is still highly valued. I still desire your company. Please do not interpret my absence this weekend as a withdrawal of my friendship.
It is simply that the logistics of this specific moment do not align.
Exactly. And I promise to make good on this social capital at a later date.
That is a phenomenal way to look at it. You are preserving the capital of the friendship by pushing the transaction to the future. And it works perfectly in practice, because in the role-play dialogue, as soon as James asks for the rain check, Sarah immediately responds with, "Of course, no worries at all. We'll celebrate together another time."
She accepts the deposit into the escrow account. She completes the social repair.
The harmony is completely maintained. Nobody's feelings get hurt. The boundaries of James's time are respected, and the door is left wide open for the future.
It's a win-win.
It really is. It's actually quite beautiful when you break down the mechanics of it. It's like watching this highly choreographed dance where neither person steps on the other's toes.
And it requires both parties to actually know the steps.
Which brings us to a really important point about intention. We've gone on quite a journey today using just a simple, everyday dialogue between Sarah and James.
We really have.
What we've seen is that whether you are actively choosing to stay in and protect your peace, or you are finding the energy to go out and meet your friends at the trailhead, the exact words you choose entirely dictate your social reality. It isn't just about vocabulary.
No, it's about pragmatics. Language is the primary tool we use to build, maintain, and sometimes inadvertently dismantle our social worlds.
Yeah.
The difference between a thriving social life and a stressful one often comes down to mastering these tiny linguistic pivots.
And now, as a listener, you have the complete toolkit for the weekend ahead. You understand the psychology behind initiating with a low-pressure soft invite, giving someone that comfortable exit ramp so they don't feel cornered.
Right.
You know how to elevate the energy of a group and validate someone's risk with an enthusiastic, "Count me in." You understand the brilliance of setting logistical boundaries so that a plan feels manageable instead of overwhelming.
That's a big one.
It is. And perhaps most crucially, you know how to navigate the delicate, high-stakes dance of the carefully cushioned rejection, using that social escrow account to keep your relationship strong, even when you absolutely cannot be there.
And, toward the very end of the source material, there is a piece of advice that is surprisingly profound.
Oh, what's that?
James and Sarah explicitly encourage their listeners to practice these phrases out loud. They structured the audio to leave pauses, asking the listener to physically speak the answers into the empty room.
Interesting. Why out loud?
Because intellectualizing social grace is one thing, but muscle memory is another. Speaking these boundaries and acceptances out loud is what actually builds the confidence to deploy them in real time when that Friday afternoon pressure hits.
So what does this all mean? Well, true social confidence isn't just about knowing the politest way to deliver a no or understanding the evolutionary biology behind a rain check.
No, it's bigger than that.
It's about looking closely at your own weekend patterns and how you leverage these tools. I want you to think about this for a second. Think about the last time you asked someone for a rain check.
Be honest with yourself.
Yeah, did you actually have a conflict? Or did you just use that phrase as a polite shield because you wanted to avoid going out? And more importantly, did you ever actually cash it in? Did you ever follow up and make good on that postponed plan?
That is the ultimate test of the rain check. If you never cash it in, eventually the account goes bankrupt.
Exactly. So maybe this weekend is the time to audit those accounts. Or maybe it's time for you to finally look at an invitation this weekend. Maybe something slightly outside of your usual comfort zone, something you'd normally instinctively decline just because you're a little tired.
And just say, count me in.
Yes. Just say, count me in, let the momentum carry you.
It's a wonderful question to carry into your Friday afternoon. The tools are all there. It's just a matter of how you choose to use them.
It really is. Thank you so much for joining us on this custom deep dive. We absolutely loved unpacking this invisible social choreography with you.
Have a wonderful, intentional weekend, whatever you decide to do. Stay in or go out, just make sure you use the right words.
We'll see you next time.